Freedom Radio Hour. Live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Freedom Radio Hour. I'm your host, Adam Cruz, and I'm sitting here next to my fantastic partner,
Eddie Nicholas. And I'm kind of like in a little daze because he said standing. I'm like, are we standing? Are we sitting? Anyway, welcome to 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan. I'm Adam Cruz, his co-host, Eddie Nicholas, as he introduced me to it in our moment of lap seizing.
Yes.
What is going on, Adam?
Well, I'm so excited to see you as always. Let us take a moment to let our listeners and our viewers know that the Freedom Radio Hour is here, not only giving you fantastic music, but we're here to be your number one source for music business trends from around the globe, right? Also, I want to make sure that if you're watching us, click subscribe. If you wish to share this information, click like and share on the videos. And if you're in our podcast, if you could rate us and leave a review, that would be helpful. And of course, we have a free app for Android and iPhone users. Search out Freedom Radio Hour. You can get all of that.
Okay, and you can also check us out on YouTube as well.
Exactly. We have a lot of places, so I hope you enjoy the episode. All right, we had to talk about this monumental day. Back in April, we were talking about the Music Modernization Act. You remember that fancy schmancy name? It had passed the House on April 25th. And basically, there's this Copyright Act of 1909. And they hadn't updated a lot of that language, some of it since that time period. They went and they got around to updating some other language in 1998. And so that addressed certain things around the formation of digital downloads. But there was a lot of it was still
almost
far
100
out.
years later.
Exactly. It's way out of date, right? So what's interesting around that 1998, since we're talking about it, that 1998 period, you had a set of folks that were having music streamed online, and they were basically this 1998 act allowed them to not have their rates increased at that time, so they were able to sit cool and collected, playing a lower royalty rate for all these years. Well, now the Music Modernization Act that passed the House in April has just passed the Senate unanimously. So I want to first say out front, I think this is great news. I see no real negative to it, other than people. That people have their own intentions, abilities, skill sets. So I guess we'll find out over time whether the Music Modernization Act passing is.
Now, just to clarify, once again, explain to people just what that does.
Okay, so let's explain it like this. Music Modernization Act basically says that the government, is going to establish a mechanical license collective called an MLC. You see, when you're talking about a performance rights society like ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC here in the States, they're collecting performance royalties. That's when your stuff is performed publicly. There's money that's paid. And so that money then is given to these performance rights societies, and then they add it to your account. Okay? So what Music Modernization Act does is do the same process, but for mechanical royalties. This is the money that Spotify's and Apple Music's pay to stream the music. Up until now, they had a big problem because there would be the royalties that they tracked that they knew they had to pay, but the rights holder, the copyright owners, they didn't know who they were. And so you think on the one hand, how is that happening? When you upload the information, don't you put everything in there? But some organizations that allow you to put digital music out there didn't have required fields for publishing.
For you to fill in all that other information.
And some are arguing
you're putting the music up there, putting it in your sets like they do on Mixcloud.
But there was no way for the streamers to pay from that because they didn't know who they were paying.
Exactly.
So what they would do was they would go to the Copyright Office, that's in Washington, D.C., and they would issue a notice of intention that they're trying to pay royalties, but they have unclaimed copyright holders to that record, that song. So that's basically what's called suspended income. Remember we were talking about ASCAP BMI that they give you 3 years to claim income that's due to you? And that's called suspended income, or they call it black box income. That's that money that sits in a black hole waiting for somebody to claim it. and they gave you 3 years to claim it. ASCAP, BMI, CSAC do before they
But
distribute
of course,
amongst
they
their
don't send
members.
you no notices in regards to that. They owe it to you, though, to remind you that you need to send in and get it. Because technically, if your information is up to date, this is for those of you that need to register. You'll get a notice or you'll get a check.
So there's a yes, but you're assuming that they've registered and they have signed up for all of the appropriate accounts that track
Track
these
all that
things,
stuff.
right? And usually they may not have, or perhaps they have. They're tracking some of it and not all of the income. Anyway, so that was a big problem. Some argue that CD Baby, CD Baby, they're one of the biggest culprits in this particular data issue because a lot of their fields around publishing were not required. So you could just click continue and then have your stuff available. And then when there was money to be made, they didn't know who to pay. I'm talking about now on the performance side, that was ASCAP, CSAC, and BMI. On the mechanical royalty side, there's a suspended income there too. And so they need help to deal with that. So that's where the MLC comes in, the Mechanical License Collective. They're going to basically be the gatekeepers for that suspended income, and they're going to work towards helping people claim
get it.
And so they needed a body to separately do that because the streamers were waiting to pay. And then you couldn't depend on the Copyright Office because they've been inundated with these notices of intention from streamers because music is streamed every single day. Let's take a break.
I was going to say, let's take a break. We'll be right back because it sounds like Adam has tons of information that I know I'm interested in, and you should be too. 91.6 FM. Be right back.
Yes.
Freedom Radio Hour. Live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
What up, beautiful people, and welcome back. I'm Eddie Nicholas, and we're so glad that you're here with us at 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, and DYMusicRadio.com. I'm sitting up here with my wonderful, knowledgeable, and I will say that again, knowledgeable friend, Mr. Adam Cruz.
Yes, and we're so delighted that you came back with us again here on the Freedom Radio Hour, your number one source for music business news and trends from around the globe. All right, so we were talking about the passage of the Music Modernization Act. You must pay attention. This is huge, huge news in the music business news
The
world.
MMA.
Yes, that's what.
MMA,
Yes, exactly. And we're not talking about that kind of fighting style because there's that mixed martial arts. We're not talking about that. But anyway, so this Music Modernization Act passed unanimously in the Senate after having already passed on the House. What happens now is the bill goes back to the House to get reapproved based on the new version. From the House to the Senate, they had changes to it. So now that the Senate has passed it, it goes back to the House. They'll approve it based on this new version, and then that bill is sent to the president to have him sign it into law. So the really great thing is that all around this is good news. As I researched and dug up all the dirt, I really see very little negative around this news except for people. That means that the people that are employed to make sure that all of this happens and the monies go to the right places are always going to be faulty because people are human and they make errors. Corruption happens. A lot of things occur. However, I do think that this is really, really good news. Let me give you more information. So, they had a big problem up until an hour and a half before it was even passed. They weren't sure if it would pass, namely because there was an issue around a major company that was a holdout. Who was that company?
Spotify?
No.
Oh, it wasn't?
No, not this time. It was Sirius Satellite
Sirius.
Radio.
Okay.
You see, Sirius is a non-interactive streamer.
Okay, now, when we talk about non-interactive, that means that you just turn on the radio and it's a set playlist or something like that
Right.
you tune into.
Correct. And you cannot interact, non-interactive.
Now, Pandora is like that. Correct?
Yes, and
Pandora.
what Pandora started like that, iHeartRadio, Sirius Satellite, and Music Match.
Clarify for me. I always thought Pandora was one of those stations that you could go in and pick. I guess pick your songs, or am I picking?
Right. So what you
station?
think you're picking is, say, Eddie Nicholas Shake, but what you're actually picking is a station that they call Eddie Nicholas, and then you'll need to hear whatever they put in that station. So you may eventually come across an Eddie Nicholas tune. Other songs may sound like Eddie Nicholas. Perhaps they'll throw in like an Otis Redding, people that sound like you, something like that, or a style like yours. But it's non-interactive streaming. they've switched that now because they want to compete in a big world.
Okay.
So they have the free service that's ad supported, and that's non-interactive. And then you opt to pay, and you could become an interactive
And do
streamer,
your own
like
list.
a Spotify, Apple Music, and the rest. That's interactive streaming. You could choose a song on demand, bloop, and it plays.
So that would be Spotify. I guess YouTube would be considered something like that too, because I noticed in YouTube you can go and pick your own playlist of songs and
Right.
things. Okay.
Yeah, so we have to talk about that. There's a royalty rate that interactive streamers pay, and a royalty rate that non-interactive streamers pay. So what the Music Modernization Act was doing was updating the language all around that.
Okay.
But they also were saying, you know, those songs before 1972, those really old songs, they're part of what's called the Classics Act. What they're doing now is saying, through this passage, non-interactive streamers like Sirius need to pay. But see, here's the T. Sirius had already was in the process of suing the Copyright Royalty Board. You see, the Copyright Royalty Board mandated that non-interactive streamers like Sirius pay an increase in what they were paying. Originally, it was 11.5%. CRB ruled that streamers like Sirius, Music Batch, and the other non-interactive ones, they should pay 15.5%.
Why not 25?
Well,
you know, these people always kill me
I
trying to
know.
percentage down and dummy down creativity in music, and I know everything, just like art, is in the eye and the ear of the beholder.
Yes.
But when it comes to creativity and paying out, they always want to pay things in a cheap way.
Exactly.
While
And
they collect the big bulk of the
but
money.
also the very interesting thing here is that if we didn't have Congress to step in and provide legislation, we'd still be waiting for our fair share. So in other words, privatization, private companies are not looking out for our best
Of course
interests.
not, they're looking out for their
Shareholders.
Shareholders.
Yeah. So we have Congress to step in and say, wait a minute, we need to do something better here. Music Modernization Act said, okay, those songs that are old, pre-1972, you Sirius are going to have to pay on those. So Sirius is like, well, we're in the process of suing CRB because we don't want that rate. So we need to figure out what we're going to do here because we're not behind this bill. So the compromise at the 11th hour was that rate, 15.5% that they were fighting over, it's staying until 2022. The compromise that Sirius struck in order for this to go through was that rate would hold for an additional 5 years to 2027. So all they did was kick that problem down the road. So Sirius will stay at 15.5%, and they withdrew their lawsuit against the CRB because they provided this compromise. So now the passage of Music Modernization Act comes through, and it's going to take 2 years for this MLC to form because, you know, they have boards to install, they have an infrastructure to put together, they've got the transfer of those dollars. But when you think about it, this suspended income that no one's claimed on the mechanical royalty side, they're saying we could stand as musicians and songwriters, we could stand to make upwards of $1.5 billion of the suspended income.
Well, let's get that income unsuspended,
you
get
have
it to
3
the
years.
artists. Well, we better look and see if we have something left. So make sure that you just follow through. We'll be right back. 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, dwildmusicradio.com.
Freedom Radio Hour.
And we're back live on Capital Radio, 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, and on the web at dwildmusicradio.com. You're deep in the zone right here on the Freedom Radio Hour. We're your number one source for music business news and trends from around the globe. I'm sitting here next to my fantastic partner,
Eddie Nicholas, what up, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, and D-Wild Music Radio. Where we left off.
Yes, there's so much tea to still cover. So we're talking about the Music Modernization Act. Congress has stepped up in terms of the Senate side. They passed.
But you know what? And I'm going to say this.
Go ahead.
I'm very proud of our Republican Senate and our Republican House.
Yes.
Because they have not always been very favorable
Right.
to
They're in the
The art
majority, and
community.
they don't have to play ball. But this
Exactly.
was co-signed, speaking of which, was co-signed by 82 senators.
Okay.
So not only were they willing to pass it, they were willing to co-sponsor the bill, which really helped it to be fast-tracked. Speaking of, this was a great segue. Thanks for bringing this up. We should talk about how the politics work. So like I said, this Music Modernization Act was passed at the House level in April. Just recently now was passed at the Senate level. It will go back. The bill will go back to the House because now it's an updated version. They'll approve the revised version. Then that sits on the president's desk for him to sign.
So
okay?
you see how a bill is made.
Yeah, exactly. How a bill becomes a law, right? So that's kind of the interesting thing here. But the reason why you had so many co-sponsors is because there was a real jeopardy of it being delayed. We talked about the Sirius satellite issue that they resolved at the 11th hour. But up until an hour and a half before, as I mentioned, they weren't sure if it would pass. And so that meant that it would be delayed until after the midterm
Now, my
elections.
question, was Sirius really needed to be in the gameplay? Because couldn't the
Well,
government
it affected them because they were in the middle of a lawsuit
I know it affected
with the CRB.
them. I know it affected them, but my question is, with this law passed, why did the government make a deal? Why did Sirius have to buy into it? Why couldn't they say, well, okay,
Because the
then
way
you
these
just have
bills
to
get
suffer.
passed is you need all of the relevant parties to agree. And so in order to get the non-interactive streamers, they needed to get the okay of not only Sirius, but Music Match and the others that do non-interactive streaming. They were also in a...
and Sirius, I guess Sirius B
is the biggest of the
one.
pie.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
So the others finally came across, but they were also now in opposition because of this same ruling, because they have to now pay on sound recordings pre-1972.
Now, see, if I was one of them, I would say, oh, no, you're going to give me the same deal that you gave Sirius.
Well, listen, that's why that was part of the argument. Remember I talked about the Digital Millennium Copyright Act that was, they reviewed it in 1998? They basically gave this sort of carve out for Sirius and others to enjoy a lower rate for all that time. For 20 additional years, that 1998 updated act allowed Sirius to continue paying nothing on those old records. They were basically grandfathered in, if you will. So I think it's long overdue that they pay.
And Sirius needs to get better stations anyway.
Well, also because they aligned themselves they said okay finally, and they agreed. It didn't delay it. If they had delayed this, it would have kicked it down the road past the midterm elections when an entirely new Congress is installed, and so they would have to basically clean the slate, shuffle the deck, and start the entire process all over again. So this is years in the making. It wasn't quick, even though it was fast tracked. It really took a long time, and so there are many.
What you mean years? And Mick, you better try decades. One more year would have been 100 years. Point blank, 1909 to 2018. Come on now.
But everybody had a vested interest. You know, even Harry Fox Agency was against this at first because it
now,
basically.
Harry Fox was where you originally could go and get your mechanical.
Yeah,
license.
so basically it took it out of their administrative hand, which they make a fee out of. They take home a fee, and it was putting it out of their hands and placing it into this MLC. So of course they weren't going to be, but they came around and others did as well. So we have the Classics Act, which pays on older records pre-1972, and I wanted to mention the AMP Act. This was a really great thing that Sound Exchange will pay. Sound Exchange will pay for producers and engineers on records that are being performed digitally or public. So that's a really great look for those that are mixers, remixers, engineers out there that are not work for hire, that own copyright in portions of the music. They can make it because somebody else will be administering that
Now,
portion today.
bringing that, I wonder if that's what our boy is involved in, the one who is claiming with Kanye West. In reference to the snippet that Kanye used. Give me his name.
So this is David Morales.
Yeah.
And we're talking about last episode.
Just kind of like right up in that.
Right, but what David Morales needs to confirm is whether he owns any copyright in Alexander O'Neal's song that he's claiming that Kanye West infringed on the copyright of. But really what we're talking about are those that own shares, own some points on the recordings. And so sound, basically up until now, mixers and engineers were relying on the artists or those they had to deal with to pay them.
And usually they get paid right up front.
Or they sometimes don't get paid. So this removes the honor system, which I'm always in favor of. I'm always in favor of an automated system because I think that's where, if you want to know where the real money is, it's in the suspended income. It's in the fact that that honor system between the musician and the other person putting it out is not always copacetic, always positive. And so when you remove that, you start to get closer to a livable wage because more of the money's coming to you because it's not going somewhere else first before
And
it
then
comes
all
to
of
you.
it is somebody just has to push a button.
And so that's kind of where we're at. We're moving towards this this era of digital music consumption and distribution, where Congress is stepping in to say, okay, you private companies, we're going to have to do better now. And this is a really huge step forward. Music Modernization Act, Classics Act, the AMP Act. Look it up, y'all. Very important legislation.
And investigate because you may have some dollars out there that are owed you, and you can now have a way to claim it and get it.
Exactly.
What they say, you got to be in it to win it.
Exactly. That's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Freedom Radio Hour. Make it your business to check out Eddie Nicholas' brand new Do You Want to Dance LP, available everywhere now. And of course, download our free app for Android and iPhone users. Check out my music at djadamcruz.com. And what else? Oh, yeah. If you're listening, thank you for listening on our podcast. If you could take a moment and rate, leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're on YouTube, you may subscribe, like, and share whatever videos we're sharing. That's all the time we have. See you next time. Have a
Peace
great
and
weekend
love.
and a great week ahead. Peace.
That's it. Peace, love, roll, and rock and soul.
Oh, I never heard that. I love that.